Hi, everybody. Glad you could join us today. We have been planning this for a while and trying to put it together. We wanted to start doing a few more lives to the group and start filling you in on information that we have, and of course, answer your questions, which is what we're going to do a lot of today. We got questions beforehand, and we're going to take questions live. So feel free to share questions in the chat. I'm really happy today that I'm joined by Tom Sykes from Solo16 Broadcast, who uses Solo a lot. He's a member of the group. He's been a member of the group for a long time, and he's been a supporter of LiveView for a long time. So we really appreciate his help. And I wanted to give him a chance to talk a little bit about what Solo16 Broadcast does.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dan. So solo16, where do I start? So we've been going since 2016, hence the name Solo16. We don't have any connection to LiveView in the sense of the name Solo. It's just a complete fluke. We've been in the business for about 30 decades, 30 years. Quite uniquely, we do a combination of television broadcast and also corporate live streaming. So this is literally from one end of the spectrum to the other. So we can go from doing a primetime BBC Breakfast live stream or Good Morning Britain or something like that, right the way down to, and I don't mean this in any derogatory way, but right the way down to live streaming funerals. We did a lot of those during COVID. And at the heart of what we do is LiveView. Effectively, LiveView is with us from the mission sort of critical high end television broadcast right the way down to the maybe streaming for one or two people in a really remote rural location. Um, so we cover a massive range in both sectors. And our primary partner, our primary most important piece of equipment is the bonding, is the reliability of using a decent encoder that has that robustness. And we've been working with LiveView and using LiveView since probably 2016 for sure, but probably going further back from there. Um, yeah, that's a little bit about our background. We've also done a video breakdown in detail of the Solo Pro, which I believe Charlotte's going to share in the chat. So there's a YouTube link to that. So when we got the Solo Pro, we did comparisons with the existing Solo, and we gave an impartial and honest review of it. Things we maybe could be tweaked, things we really enjoyed, things we liked, including things like boot up time. And that's all on the link that should be in the chat at some point, and you'll be able to see that. If not, contact us at Solo16 and we'll send you the link. It's quite in depth. That's kind of us.
Thank you for that intro. I really appreciate it.
Have you got any points on that? I mean, I can talk you through kind of the difference of these. It's probably a good place to start, actually. So, for us, I suppose the primary difference, and again, it's all covered off in this video, but the primary advantage for us of this is the foreseeable transfer to HEVC and using half the data that we would normally do. Case in point for that is, for example, when we are in at a funeral or somewhere remote where data is fairly limited, and being able to send a picture feed using around half the amount of bandwidth and data that we would need to do with the current or the old Solo is just fantastic. It obviously it's cheaper for the client, it's cheaper for us, and it makes ultimately makes the product more reliable. Um, the 4K functionality of this is fantastic. We did a really long test. I couldn't quite believe that this would be really good with 4K, but it was. We did, I think, 2 4-hour soak tests ourselves with this, which Dan's not aware of, but we did, and it was fantastic, and it hit the spot. The boot up time, again, it's covered in the video. I know we've got a question about this coming up, but it just blows the socks out of the original Solo. Again, a real world case study of this. We were doing a job where we were forced to reboot the original Solo, and that reboot time was happening in the middle of the live stream, and it just felt like it was going forever. And again, this is so much quicker. Um, the battery on this is better. The charging options on this is better. The SRT functionality now, so we do a lot with vMix in our studio here. We can broadcast from this to vMix, so we can have remote people with Solo Pros sending their pictures with practically zero latency right into our system here. Before, when we did that with this, could still do it with a Solo, but we had to kind of go through an RTMP encoder and all that kind of thing. LiveView Connect is another fantastic addition which we've been using. Dan can talk a bit more about that later, but you can see just how nice and simply they slide in. You can forget about it. You can plug these into your LiveView Solo and have the contract with them, and it includes your LRT and everything. That's phenomenal. And also they do a great hit bag for these, which we've been using. Actually, we've been using it with our TV encoder as well as with the Solo Pro, and it's really well made. It's just, as a cameraman working in the field, working on a beach with a single camera, being able to look down into the bag, knowing that everything's protected and covered. I can see down into the screen. It fits nicely on my hip. I don't have to have it hanging off the back of the camera, which is always makes your camera a lot heavier. So the hip bag is 100% worth investing in if you need to take the bag out and about. And if you are watching this and you have an LU300, I'm sure Dan won't mind me saying, but it also fits the 300 because it's the same body. So it's well worth for TV. If you just do TV work, get one of the hip bags for that as well, because it's fantastic. So Dan, on that, why could you talk a bit more for people that don't understand that about the HEVC and what it is over H.264, and also the fact that I think a lot of the content delivery networks like Facebook and YouTube, they're not really supporting it yet, but that's definitely the way it's going to go, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. So, HEVC was the successor standard to H.264 developed by MPEG, which is a subcommittee of the ISO. And of course, it's a bunch of companies that get together that understand digital video, and they all contribute intellectual property to this pool of different parts of the codec and come up with these video codecs. Is where MPEG-2 came from. And of course, MPEG-2 is what really enabled almost all of what we understand of digital video today: DVDs, cable systems. Then H.264, which enabled all of the current generation of web streaming, including all of the streaming services like YouTube TV or Apple TV Plus, Netflix. We're all enabled by H.264. And then they came out with HEVC, which is roughly just for a shorthand, call it the same quality in half the bandwidth, or twice the quality in the same bandwidth. The problem was H2, just like with MPEG-2, when you look at the time it took for H.264 to replace that, H.264 was so successful that there wasn't a huge motivation for big companies to change when they already had a ton of infrastructure, built in H.264. So why doesn't Facebook take HEVC in, or some of the other, platforms out there? And the answer is they've got these massive platforms with all of this code deployed around the world, and the burden of switching, there's got to be a big enough advantage to it, and they just haven't seen that advantage yet. But YouTube has. So I just returned from NAB and had a chance to meet again with our contacts at YouTube there, and they were talking about their HEVC implementation, which we've talked a little bit about in the group as well. So there's two options for it. One, the Solo can support today, and one we're working on. The one that they can support today is HEVC inside of SRT. And of course, the hang up with that is that as a YouTube user, you have to be whitelisted to use SRT. The good news I just got in NAB, and this is just fresh, I haven't even had a chance to talk to
Hot
Tom
off the press.
yeah, is that they're now excited to start really rolling that out to more people. So my contact offered, if we've got Solo users, since Solo's already been tested with it, that are anxious to use SRT, to you let us know, we let YouTube know, and they're going to whitelist you for that. So start sending in those requests. They're anxious to get people whitelisted for SRT support, and they're going to start rolling it out. The other one is, they work themselves on an extension to RTMP. So the whole blocker here is that RTMP dates from, good Lord, 20 years ago,
Mm.
and only was built with H.264 in mind, and doesn't, in its header structure, doesn't support HEVC. But it's a relatively minor change to have it support that. So YouTube again got together, Google got together with a couple other industry companies, said we're going to make a RTMP enhanced spec. Call it, it's really just like a file shared on GitHub that sort of explains how to do it. And everybody who complies with that will do HEVC and RTMP. And of course, everybody can already use RTMP with YouTube. So we're working to support that in the solo infrastructure. It's speaking frankly, and one of the whole reasons I wanted to have this, live today is to speak as transparently as we can about all of these answers. It's a big change for us because it has to change all of the cloud software at a core level, which is never easy for us to build, test, make sure it's not going to upset anything else, and then deploy. But we're working on it. So hopefully sometime this year, late this year, we'll get to RTMP enhanced support and be able to do it that way too. But again, jump back to the good news. If you were anxious to use SRT into YouTube, we've got a little bit more of a green light from Google on that. So just let me know and we'll start filling it in.
That's great. I mean, of course, the TV world has pretty much made the switch now already. So the
In closed
LE300
ecosystems like LiveView itself, like when you're sending from a 300 to an LU2000 or LU4000, yeah, there's a lot of HEVC use out there, right?
Yeah. I mean, I know from our point of view that the LE300 that we use in television, that's already HEVC, and I've seen the benefits of that. I know that Vimeo, who we're streaming through today, I know Vimeo have the ability to have HEVC because you can stream to it through their software that they supply, but they don't unlock it for for us to stream to with LiveView. Yeah. They've kept it for their own their own functionality, but clearly their servers and things like that can cope with HEVC.
Right.
I think there was a question around bonding, wasn't there? And
there was, yeah. So when we asked the whole group for some pre-questions, and Tom and I have gone through them, Mike asked, what's the difference between LiveView bonding and Speedify? Well, I think, which is a really good question. So LiveView bonding was developed very specifically for video and audio delivery. It's based on high bandwidth in one direction with low bandwidth in the return direction. It's really built for cellular networks. So the algorithm, I shouldn't say algorithm, the protocol from the beginning was built for cellular networks and some specific behavior the cellular networks show, and was really designed for reliable delivery of audio and video. When you look at general bonding mechanisms like Speedify or PepLink that are able to do two-way bonding and do TCP/IP bonding, those are interesting and great for many protocols. I know people do deliver audio and video over them, which is great. I don't think they're, pre-built for audio and video, and you're going to see some efficiency loss, with that, because they're more general, right? They're trying to deliver all kinds of traffic, all kinds of packet traffic in both directions. They've got to be more general to do that, and that always, is a handoff of how much efficiency you can have focused in on one protocol type and one payload type versus when you're trying to be generalized.
We just had a question in here from Robert. Maybe this may come in later on, but could you provide any insights into upcoming updates for both the unit and the LRT portal? Is there anywhere that people can go to kind of, I suppose this Facebook page is probably the best place, isn't it, to get that kind
Facebook
of intel?
page is pretty good. We do try to post in the knowledge base, solohelp.liveview.tv. And so if there's a new firmware coming out, we will post there about the firmware. I don't post for every single portal update. We're trying to do portal updates quicker. I say that we're trying. We haven't succeeded so much at the start of the year here, but I think we're going to get some of the issues behind us and be able to do portal updates quicker. So, but I'll probably end up talking about those a little bit on the Facebook group as well. In fact, one I think we're going to deploy tomorrow. So portal update coming tomorrow, and that's going to include things like what Robert asked about in the original questions about battery icon improvements. So I know everybody's, long felt a little bit of pain because the battery icon doesn't really all that useful, in the way that it's displayed. So the update tomorrow is going to include whether or not you're plugged into the wall, what the percentage of the battery is right in the portal on the icon.
That's on the portal, not on the unit, because the unit's pretty good like that, isn't it?
Unit already has it, right? Yeah, this is for the portal,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Another really good question that's come up from colleagues of mine, actually, and I think it's also been asked quite a few times on the forum, on the Facebook page, is for those that don't know, with the television live view LE300 encoder, you're able to give connection priority to individual connections. So, for example, if you're plugging a LAN connection into here, and the 4G is not very good on the television encoder, you're able to say, I want all of the bandwidth to come off this LAN connection unless it hits a certain bit rate, 5 meg or whatever, and then I want it to come off the 4G, which is brilliant if you've got a something like a Starlink where you've got sort of unlimited free data and you just want to top it up if that drops with the 4G. There isn't any kind of management of the cellular connections at the moment on here. Is there a reason for that? Is that something that could be developed, or is it what's the
Yeah,
score
I
there?
mean, it was a lot of those. So some of those features that the 300S has, and again, I'm going to speak as transparently on this as I can. The 300S has, we really see as television functionality, right?
Yeah,
Television broadcast functionality, and we want to reserve for those units. But something like that, what we call least corresponding, was more just a prioritization decision. Like, what features do we think are really important to streamers? We want to, bring those, develop new ones that are specific to streaming. But what ones does the 300S currently support that we just didn't think were as high priority over the years for this use case? That was one of them. But over the years, we have had a couple people ask about it. I think it is possible to port from the 300S to the Solo. I think Starlink, is a great example of how that landscape has changed a
mm,
little bit, because when we first developed that feature, satellite bandwidth was quite expensive, right? And so the idea that you were using it in a way where it was like only fall back to the
yeah,
was really the opposite. We had developed it 4 years ago. Only fall back to satellite if you must, because that's the most expensive bits you
yeah,
deliver,
yeah,
right? And use cellular when you can. And then over the years, it's kind of evolved as both satellites gotten cheaper, and it's gotten more common for some of our users to use things like a land drop at a arena or a hotel or something like that, and say, well, all right, use the LAN only until you can't, and then use the cells. So I think we see the value in moving that to Solo, and we can look at porting that. I'll just add one thing though, that when I know we don't offer data plans everywhere in the world. You mentioned Solo Pro Connect in the beginning and how it's been working
yeah,
for
yeah,
us.
yeah,
Where we do offer data plans for Solo, we always make sure they're unlimited, because we think that fits users like yourself workflow the best for this use case, which is different than our broadcast encoders and the way we do data there. So in an unlimited data world, hopefully most users aren't feeling the pressure of, I've got to use LAN only until it fails, or Starlink only until it fails, and then use cells, because use as much cells as you want, right? You don't have to balance
yeah.
out. I know not every user buys our data. Some users are on limited plans where it's like, I'd like to use less cell if I could. So again, we definitely see the value there, and it's not any kind of other kind of blocker other than just prioritization of, what are the most important features to move, and where do they fall.
Sure. Another question's just come in. It says it would be great if live view does not cut the streaming when no video is received, i.e., the camera operator was to change the camera battery. Just stream a black signal until video feed is back. Is that something that's possible?
So, you know, that's maybe a little bit harder to change. And I say that not out of like a technical reason, but like that dates from a kind of early build, early decisions of how the system should work. And we kind of goes back to the idea of data plans and limits of data. We didn't want users accidentally using a lot of data when they didn't have a camera plugged in. And we had a lot of incidents going back through LiveView's history of crews that didn't realize the unit was still streaming, unplugged the camera quickly from it, packed everything away, put it in the back of the truck, started to drive away, didn't realize the unit's still streaming and still burning data while it's doing that. Did we get a little too aggressive on the timeout? Maybe, right? I feel that pain from users saying, like, I think it's 30 seconds currently, is a little too fast to swap a battery or fix a kicked out cable or something like that. So that is something, maybe I look at extending that timeout a little bit. But I think we want a timeout there. It's just a question of whether we got a little turn the dial a little too far to the red, on that 30-second timeout. Maybe that can be adjusted.
Or maybe it could be an option you could, turn on and off or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Someone's asked about the boot up time. Obviously, I've mentioned that. I timed it in the video that we did, the kind of behind the scenes thing, I suppose. So the current solo, or the smaller the original solo, was about 1 minute 30 from power up, and this one is a fantastic 27 seconds. So yeah, is there any way that that either can be improved, even more than that?
So on the, we're all about transparency today. So let's give the hard answer on the original solo, right? No, there's no way to improve that boot up time on the original solo. It's a limitation of the
Yep.
hardware that's there. We don't plan on making that kind of deep change to that platform anymore. So if we've got to put out some sort of critical bug fix, maybe like a security change or something like that, we would do it. But for the most part, speaking very transparently, there's not going to be any more major software changes to the original solo platform. It's been available
Yeah.
for more than 8 years. We think it's done its jobs, done its service, and encourage everybody to keep using them. There's still some brand new for sale,
Oh yeah.
so don't feel like you can't not buy them. We're going to support them for the lifetime of those units, absolutely, and in terms of software and the way the cloud behaves, but just not a big new firmware coming out for those ones. Now on the current platform, Solo Pro, yes, every new firmware we put out, we keep track of. Have we impacted boot time at all? Can we even improve it a little bit, or have making sure we haven't slowed it down any? And that is because boot time's we agree, a very critical part of the whole workflow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we watch it closely on the new platform. A lot of what can be improved now, like in terms of just pure boot time, is now still a limitation of that hardware and the CPU that's in there. But what we keep a close eye on is how long it takes to connect the first modem. So that's can make the kind of the biggest impact from holding down the button to when you're first streaming, and there's a lot of variability there in terms of modems that are used and new technologies and even different carriers that have different connection sequences for the networks and stuff like that. So there's always a little bit to be careful of there and or improve there, and the internal core team keeps track of that for every version.
I was just pondering on that previous question actually about the going to black, and of course in Stream Tools you can have a slate, can't you? So if it loses the feed, you can have something that you upload and it cuts to that feed. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, and it is a good point. You make a good point on that. That's one of our core 3, launch features for Stream Tools. I want everybody to see Stream Tools though as like the whole toolbox of tools together. So I don't want anybody to interpret that answer as, hey, it costs $100 more a month to not have to cut the stream when I unplug the camera. That's what I don't want interpreted on that answer, right? But like
Sure.
Stream Tools is a whole toolbox of tools, one of which is absolutely a safety slate or fallback slate, whatever you want to call it, and that covers you for all kinds of eventualities. You kick the cable out of the camera, you need to swap a camera battery, you just need to use the bathroom for a little bit, and you're an IRL streamer, that kind of thing. Then then that's the fallback slate option. And we're going to make some improvements to the fallback slate option on Stream Tools this year. So right now you can do an image, and the original intent was you can also do a video. We got to just catch up to a few things to fix there, and then you'll be able to do a video for the fallback slate as well.
And that probably brings us on to the next question about kind of scoreboards, and we've had a question about that, haven't we?
Yeah, so I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Akshay asked, can we add a Cricut scoreboard to the system? And can a logo be added as just part of LRT, not Stream Tools? So good 2 questions. Let me break them up. So yes, on the Stream Tools side right now, the only graphic we support is a logo bug called, what's traditionally called a bug graphic. That was just our launch feature. We do want to get back to a little bit more complex graphics, particularly including scoreboards. So I know scoreboards are kind of like surprisingly hard to add to a stream, and they really feel like they shouldn't be, right? a pretty basic part of any kind of sports streaming. So we want to get back to offering some kind of scoreboard on the stream. I've got some plans of how to do that. I just met with a couple partners at NEB, as a matter of fact, and talked about how we can do that. So I think I don't quite have a timeline yet. I don't want to commit to anything, but graphics probably the next major feature I want to add to Stream Tools. And ideally, if I can do it without changing any of the math on how many cloud resources we need, it would be in the same price. So my intent with Stream Tools is, again, toolbox of features, put more tools in it, doesn't change the price tag to use Stream Tools. The second part of that question was, can you add just a logo without resorting to Stream Tools? And I know that's been a request for a long time. And again, trying to give the very transparent answer here, the answer is no, right? So one of the key parts before pre-Stream Tools is that we never modify the video, what's called the video elementary stream. So from the encoder through the cloud, we're not transcoding, we're not decoding the video, we're sending it straight on. All the Solo Cloud does is repacketize that stream from LRT into the next protocol. That would mean inserting the graphic back at the encoder level, which is theoretically possible, but just not something that we've got set up for that encode hardware on those units. So it's a long reach to reach that. Stream Tools was the first feature we made that does decode the video all the way. And that's, where its power comes from, changes the dynamics a little bit, and lets us do things like the fallback slate, graphics, all of those things. So once you're decoding the video at some step, then that's where you can overlay everything. And that's why we're going to have logo bugs there, and that's where we're going to have scoreboards and any future graphics as well.
Another thing about Diego's asked about the portal itself. In terms of the destinations that you have on there, they're quite big thumbnails. They take up quite a bit of real estate. Is there a way that they could be put into a list view instead of thumbnails, maybe with your saved destinations at the top, just so you don't have to kind of find them?
Yeah, boy, if I could show you some of the mock-ups we've worked on the portal over the years, that I've been long planned for the destination list to be a list and to actually be sortable by like type. Show me social networks, show me true CDNs, show me tools, like Restream or Caster or some of our partners like that, in the list. So, and why haven't we gotten that? We just always end up with some other fix or feature or change that somehow ends up as higher priority. So we spent a lot. I talked a little bit about it in the group. We spent a lot of last year working on Stream Tools, and that took a lot of our development time in getting that launched. Now that we have that launched, there are changes we want to make to it, so that's going to take more development time. But I wanted to take the first part of the year here and get back to some quality of life changes to the portal. So you're going to see the deploy tomorrow that's got the battery icon fix. We're working on some fixes to change your password, the ability to self-submit your own logs. Hey, I had an issue with this stream. Open a case for it and move my logs off of the unit so I don't have to wait for support to say, hey, can you power the unit back on? We'll get logs for it. The ability to set your own firmware. So see a list of all the available firmwares and pick which one you want to load to. Those should only take the next few weeks-ish, of development to all get out as part of it. And then, there's a couple screens that really need improvement. We were just talking in the group about one. I think probably before I do destinations, we'll do subscription info, because subscription info is not super usable today. I'll admit, to really see which the end dates for each one is independently, what one's going to renew next. It's not. It was really built with kind of having one or two subscriptions in mind, and users that have like 2 or 3 or more units and 2 subscriptions per unit. Now it's overwhelmed, and it needs improvement. So maybe that first. But then destinations, absolutely. Yes, I've long thought about how destinations could be better.
I think from our point of view, destinations work. I agree with Diego's comment about it would be nicer to prioritize it. But if I was your boss, I'd say, let's work on the bigger issues. Let's work on the other functionality. The destinations functionality works for us. It's obviously probably more important to Diego than maybe us. But I can see his point there. But yeah, I think the subscriptions thing, because like you mentioned, we own quite a few solos, and it has been occasionally a bit confusing as to when one expires and is that this one, and but there's a latency question Robert's asked, isn't there, about latency?
Yeah, so I see Robert asked, could the Pro unit support 800 milliseconds latency? And what about letting the end user set the exact latency instead of just picking from two options? So the answer on that is yes, right? I think the Pro can support 800 millisecond latency. It's always been an intent to bring that feature to it. We just need to catch up to some testing around it and putting it in the portal. That's interesting, the request for going back to the kind of way the LU units work with the slider bar, and you can pick any latency you want in between. Interested in everybody's feedback. You put it in the group, like what one's easier. I think for this user's base, our feeling was like the slider bar is maybe a little too, like, how do you pick whether 1200 is right or 1400 or 1600? So maybe it was better just to have a few options. But if people would prefer having that kind of granular control, there's no technical blocker on that at all. It was really just a workflow and a ease of use question on it. So, but 800 milliseconds for sure, and the intent is to bring that to Pro. And again, that's the latency from the encoder to the solo cloud, right? And then the solo cloud sends on SRT or RTMP, and that's got its own latency to the next step in the line. And then whatever your next step in the line might have its own latency. So if you're sending that to YouTube, even in its low latency mode, that adds quite a bit of latency because it's got to distribute it all around the world. So we sometimes have users confused on that, right? Like, hey, I set once, you told me low delay mode was 1 second latency. I measured it, it was 16 seconds or whatever. And it's like, well, there's a whole latency budget usually on a stream, right? And you've got to look at each leg of the stream and figure out what your approximate latency is, and then decide, am I getting the right number or something wrong here somewhere in the middle? And where's that latency coming from?
Yeah, I mean, someone's asked just on that. With the TV encoders, you can add you can change the broadcast delay, if you like, the latency there. If you're using connectivity that's not particularly reliable or the signal's not very great, there isn't a way with the solo where you can kind of let the solo work even better for you by extending that latency.
It's an interesting question. Yeah, that a relatively new feature for even the broadcast encoders, right? That ability to change delay on the fly. You used to always have to, and the solo, you still stop the stream, reset a new latency, start the stream again, and get going. It's an interesting point. There's a feature now on the broadcast encoders for anybody that's not familiar with it where you can change latency on the fly. That's kind of a weird thing, right? Because it's like, how does that work mathematically? And it works by slightly increasing the latency over a period of time so that you don't actually visually see a change in the video as you're going, or hear it in the audio as you're going, but it's a little tricky to do that way. Could that be ported to solo? Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that request before. Actually, hadn't thought about it much myself, but interesting to hear it today.
There was a question about, I think it's Satish asked a question about using, now 5G's come into place, is live view bonding over maybe a single 5G connection that's good? Do we need, I'm interpreting his question, but kind of, do we need bonding if we've got really good speed now on potentially one 5G connection? I think that's kind of what he means.
Yeah. So, I think the answer that we've seen now working with 5G for 4 or 5 years or so very closely as a company is that absolutely you still need bonding, right? 5G was designed to improve the number of users that can be in a cell. That was one of the primary goals of 5G because LTE had reached some congestion limits. Improve the amount of bandwidth through the air that the protocol itself supports, even in current frequencies, and then add new frequencies to the list of frequencies that can be used for cellular transmission, and add deterministic latency. So one of the things that our algorithm takes into account on LTE and other networks, Wi-Fi included, is that latency rapidly changes between each packet delivery, which is very different from a LAN connection where latency is much more deterministic. 5G is much more like LAN where the latency is deterministic. So those three things together make for bigger bandwidth, a much steadier stream because of the latency, not getting blocked out because of the congestion. But what not a list included in that list is never failing to have that connection. So you're still subject to RF patterns, positions of radio, numbers of towers, where everything is. So if you're on the move, absolutely, you're going to eventually leave that cell, and whether you immediately connect to the next tower, of course, the cellular network would love if you do, but we all know the reality is, even in the modern age, you don't always, even though the networks have gotten a lot better. And then even if you're not on the move, just the peculiarities of RF, the presence of other interference, the presence of an RF shadow,
Yeah.
truck passing by, things like that can always mean the loss of a connection long enough that you might lose some signal. So we still see very much the value of bonding there. We think 5G is great, and LiveView's talked a lot about this, and I've talked about it personally at a number of different panels, because things like deterministic latency are great for us. Like, it means less work for the CPU to do on just managing those things. And anytime there's less work for our internal CPU to do, there's more things we can do with that CPU cycles, like adding more features or other types of reliability or improving the
Yeah.
quality, that goes along with it. So that all those parts are great, but we just haven't seen a world yet where a single RF connection can get these broadcasts done.
There's one elephant in the room we need to talk about, Dan. LRT activation times.
Oh, I know.
What's the plan? Because they seem to be a little bit hit and miss. Sometimes they get activated really quickly. Sometimes they take a while. I say we've all done it. I haven't, because I'm too anal. But I know people that have been in the field that maybe not used their live view for a month or two. They fire it up. They're ready to do a live. Maybe they should have done their homework, and they realise that the LRT's expired. They go to activate it.
Yeah.
What's the plan there to speed that process up?
It's a pain point for sure. I know it's a pain point for all our users. If it makes you feel any better, it's a pain point for us internally too, because we wish it was faster. And it's, we hate to see it be a blocker for our users out there. It's really, I can't describe how complex the system is on the back end, and that's our fault. I mean, that's there's no reason why that should be a blocker for you, but just how the system has to tell our back end, hey, this user paid for it, and then send that all the way through to the unit. We've asked the teams to take a deep dive on how that can be improved. They did. They've now changed parts of the back end to be ready for that. We've got one last change we've got to make on the very first step part of it, or kind of our, call it the portal part of it, of how it inserts that information after the payment. And then we should be on a much faster thing. It's been, again, not to like cry tears here, but like, it's been years in the making, and I'm excited to have it launched. And it's going to be sometime in this quarter, knock on wood, that we're going to get it out finally after years of suffering with it. But I agree 100%. It's a pain point. It shouldn't have been this long. And it is, it should just be instantaneous. And that's what we're working on. So
that's good to hear. I think it's really good that that you personally come onto this group and answer stuff and address things quite quickly. It's great to have a face of the company that could kind of answer that. We all understand that we have to create support tickets and we have to wait, and that's part of business. But there's been so many times when someone's asked a question and I've thought Dan will know, and you've answered really quickly. And as a community, that's really, really appreciated. Talking of which we weren't, but I'm going to throw it in seamlessly. Talking of the modem, the Connect kits, is there plans? Obviously, when you buy the bag, you get the 4 Y cables, or the 2 Y cables. Is there plans to do a 4 set of these?
There's long been a plan. I kind of talked about it a little bit when we first launched the 2 modem kit around fall of last year, and then we got a little delayed on the 4 modem kit for just internal reasons. So the plans for it, the code for it, even the packaging, the cardboard boxes and everything for it have been done for a little bit. We hit a few snags on just some internal parts of the build that had to be retested. We found a few issues, and we're working on the last one of those right now. So I feel like a lot of things now I've said, like, oh, it's coming right around the corner, and then like hopefully we'll really deliver on those. But yes, 4 modem kits. We thought we were even going to launch beginning of this month, April. Didn't quite make it. Now it's looking like the end of this month, but that'll finally be available in the Solo Pro Connect variation. If you happen to live in the USA, there'll also be a Solo Connect variation of that. Just a word of caution. Obviously, the 4 modem, in my mind, the 4 modem Solo Connect still won't work on the original Solo because it just doesn't support 4 modems, right? So that's the limitation there. So Solo Connect, which is the USA only variant of that product, still works on original Solo. It's an option to go buy if you're buying the original Solo still, the stock that's out there, or you buying one off of a secondhand market, or just happen to still have one. That's the product you want, but only get the 2 modem version of that because the original Solo can only support 2 modems. Any Pro, whether you're getting the USA only version of it, the Solo Connect, or the Solo Pro Connect, which supports 3 regions: Canada, Europe, and a kind of traveler package for the whole world that lets you roam around the whole world. Those will now come in 2 and 4 modem variations, and the plans will, price a little differently based on 2 or 4 modems, and it'll know when you go to activate it whether you have a 2 or 4 modem kit, and ask you, which one you want to activate. You brought up the Y cable, so I just want to clarify on that too, because there's been a little bit of confusion on those. So all the 4 modem kits will come with Y cables. You'll never have to separately buy cables to support a kit you buy from us. It did come with the bag originally, because the bag was our way for securely holding 4 modems. We didn't ship it with the original unit because we didn't want users to get confused and think we were saying that you could fit 4 modems in the sleeve, and
Yep.
didn't want users to use it that way. And now we also offer the Y cable separately. So if you're using your own bag, which a lot of users do, or you've built a desktop stand, or you've got some other fixing solution that we've seen some really creative ones out there. I saw somebody that had a 3D print of a piece of plastic that would go on the sleeve and then hold them at orthogonal positions so that the antennas wouldn't detune each other. It was kind of neat. So solutions like that, then now you can separately buy the Y cables, and that should be available right now, that you can go buy the Y cables on them. I had originally intended maybe to do our own desktop stand. Like I use a throwdown form factor. You mentioned vMix, I use it next to my vMix machine, that kind of thing, and I want to throw down form factor. So maybe that's still in the cards, that we'll look at something like that to ship.
I think a rack. I mean, we've got one kind of over there we use with vMix, but quite often a rack mounting options come up quite a few times for people that put them in trucks or want to put them as part of their PPUs. That could be good.
Yeah, I agree.
A really interesting question here from Adam, and it's a technical one, really around cellular. He uses 6 modems at once normally. While broadcasting in a weak cellular area, is it better to use all 6, with some of those modems having lower connectivity or bandwidth, or just use 4 that are really strong? So you might have 4 that are on a few that, the Vodafone signal there might be really good and the O2's okay. Is it better to load bear with all of them so that they fluctuate, or ditch some of them and just go with the strong ones?
Yeah, that's a tricky question to answer. I feel like it's almost sometimes personal opinion. Very, what's the old chaos math shorthand? A butterfly beats its wings in Central Park, and you get rain in Tibet. So very small differences of your use case can make a big difference there. Are you moving, and the potential that you're going to move from one RF condition to another, and then those cells that aren't doing well might suddenly do well, and that's important to have them there. Or are you stable, and it's just, carrier X has almost no coverage there, then carrier X is probably never going to do you any good, right? And it's not necessarily hurting anything to have it plugged in, but overall you probably could have done the transmission without it, and it wouldn't have made it, would have made any difference there, and you'd be better off with it. I think that the math comes around how many discrete carriers are there in your country. So you guys in the UK have a kind of advantage that you've got a lot of carriers there, and they each have discrete networks. Here in the US, we're down to just 3, really, except for a few pockets of the country. And so the idea of having like 6 or 8 modems gets a little less value when you only have 3 networks out there, and 4 starts to make more sense. There is some one last variable I'll throw into that soup of math. There is some catch there that, like, modems are complex devices. The modem itself is a small computer with its own processing power and running its own operating system. All the way down to the SIM has its own operating system in it. How complex is that, right? So there is some feeling there of, like, there are cases even in the modern day where those modems just fail, do the wrong thing, make the wrong decisions in terms of their connectivity or whatever. So, for instance, having 2 even on the same carrier still gives you redundancy just for that type of silly failure, call it, of the modem itself. That's pretty rare anymore. That was much more common on like 3G and even in the early LTE. Now on LTE Advanced and 5G, they've really worked out some of the issues on the modems, but still a thought out there. So hard thing to answer. I like 4. I think 4 really carries you through, but if 6 is working for you, I would never say don't you do what's working for you, right? I wouldn't tell you not to do what's working for you, for sure.
I think it also depends on the environment that you're in.
Yeah.
If you're somewhere quite remote and let's say, speaking of the UK networks, let's say that O2 and 3 are really poor connectivity. The first thing we do when we go to a job is we connect them individually. We do some ping tests. We have a look at what the speeds are like. If something is really low, like a meg, nothing, I won't bother putting it into the mix. But what I would say is, if I was doing a job, say in central London or a big city, you can get quite a lot of fluctuation there with the different networks. So I would probably load that up with as many different networks as I can, because that is more likely to change. Whereas
Yeah.
it's unlikely in a rural location that if three's bad when you get there, three's still going to be bad in
Right. Right.
in an hour's time.
Absolutely.
Um, you've got a question there about interlaced, haven't you?
Yeah, I know it's been a topic a couple users are very concerned about, which is the support for 1080i 50 to 1080p 50 support on the Solo Pro. So absolutely, let me give an update on that. Just quick bit of background. Like this, after an investigation, surprised me. Turned out to be a requirements misunderstanding on the video encode card. So we had always intended 1080i 50 would support going to 1080p 50 through deinterlacing, and then along the development process for the video cards for Solo, that got misinterpreted into a 1080p 25 as the output on that. So we're going back now to add back the P50 option to it. It's a little complex because it goes into the firmware that runs just the video card, separate piece of code from even the firmware on the unit. That's always very sensitive to change, so goes through a ton of QA whenever we make a change there, and that's kind of the process it's in right now. The bad news for you is we're just on the eve of a new firmware version for Pro, probably going to be called 10.6. It's got a bunch of fixes in it, including for SDI level A, SDI level B, which I know has also tripped up a lot of SDI users out there. I'm testing that fix right now myself on those units, but that version will not have 1080p 50 deinterlace in it yet because it's still in this add back and QA process. It'll have to be the next firmware after 10.6, which hopefully won't take as long as 9.7.3 to 10.6 took, which was roughly 6 months, I think, since the last firmware. We're going to try to do this next one faster, even if it just includes that one fix for deinterlacing. But it is in the plan. Was a missing feature. It is in the plan, and we're going to bring it back for sure.
That's good. I've got a question. Um, Quite a few people are listing their older solos, and firstly, a word of caution I would give: I would never buy any live view products on eBay, because quite often they're fakes, or well, not fakes, but they've been stolen, and live view has turned them off, which they can do, so they're just a doorstop. So if you ever want to buy any kind of secondhand live view, go through this page, or try and because it's a real big problem on eBay. But if people want to sell their second-hand Solo, ideally, obviously upgrading to the Solo Pro, and there's quite a few listed on this page, how easy is it to transfer this to another individual or another company? Is it feasible? Is it possible? And yeah, that was my question.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good topic. So to your point on eBay, I'll even go one step further, which is the broadcast units don't technically support an aftermarket, right? So those each have an individual contract between the user of it and LiveView, and there's no situation where we support that user then taking that unit and reselling it. Almost like you said, almost all the times you see something like an LU800 on eBay, it's because it was stolen, right? And then specifically to prevent theft and to protect the crews out there that use that very expensive gear, we don't support that kind of resale on it. But on Solo, 100% we support an aftermarket because it's a prosumer device, and we know you've made a big investment in it, and it's a different use case than the Pro gear, and we want you to be able to turn around when you're done with that and say somebody else can use my well-loved unit and get value out of it. Specifically, in the upgrade from original Solo to Solo Pro, we came up with the whole loyalty program system to value that. So you get a $250 credit when you've got an original Solo in your account and you register a Pro, so long as the serial number on the original Solo's never had a credit claimed on it before. Good point for the aftermarket there. So if you're thinking about a scheme of buying up, a lot of used Solos out there for less than $250 and registering the $250 credit, you're probably going to be blocked because each serial number can only be claimed once. But if you owned it for years and now you're upgrading to Pro, that's exactly the scenario we had in mind. You get
So
the
you're still
$250.
doing that deal? I thought it was only a limited time. It's still
We
active,
talked
is it?
about it being a limited time, but I keep pushing to keep it around, and it's still around right now. Absolutely. So if you happen to have a serial,
I
if you
might
haven't
gather up
upgraded
all our
yet,
other. I might gather up all our other ones then, Dan, and see what we can do.
get that $250 credit. We had some users that have like 50 solos, so imagine how much credit they got when they
Wow.
get that first Pro. But so then to your point on how to resell that original solo, yes, then the idea was you get the $250 credit and you keep the original solo, use it as a backup, use it as the second stream, or sell it, right?
Mm.
And that's the other option to get more value out of it. So make sure you cancel all subscriptions from it first. I wish we had a little bit better control in the portal that when you go to deregister something, we warn you that you should also cancel these subscriptions. We don't, speaking frankly. So make sure you cancel all the subscriptions first, then deregister it in the portal. Click on the little gear icon in the list on the left where you see each of the units and where you would typically rename, the alias for the unit. And there's a remove unit button, and then it's ready to sell. Right. So then
Brilliant.
turn it around and sell it. And I agreed, it's because we support an aftermarket there. There's a little bit of crossover with theft, and we have some theft on units, and it's hard to tell if a user's legitimately selling it or stole a unit. And I wish it wasn't like that. But when you support an aftermarket like that, there's some, there's a fringe there that you can't get rid of entirely. So.
We're getting close to being out of time. I've got two portal questions that have come in, and then I'm going to give you some quick fire questions that have
Sure.
also come in. Portal questions. Is it possible to increase the portal? It'll be a technical term, but basically we get logged out quite quickly. Is it possible to extend that process so that we don't keep getting logged out?
That is a good question. I think that at this point the portal maybe even mismatches. So like we use under the hood, LiveView's core kind of user management authentication system for solo users as well. Same thing that Central uses for users. So that had a certain timeout at one point. I think, speaking frankly, that's been extended, and we never extended the solo portal to go with it. And I probably can extend it now to match up. So let me add that to the roadmap, and I'll see if we can improve that a little.
That'd be good. And another question, and I personally would love this. Is it possible to clean your Wi-Fi history, Wi-Fi network history from the unit?
Yeah, there's like a couple improvements coming to the Wi-Fi. Again, quality of life improvements to the portal that we wanted to catch up to here in 2024. Wi-Fi was one of them. So forget the network that you're on, which I don't think is supported from the portal today, only from the unit itself. Enable disable Wi-Fi, which is, again, supported from the unit itself, but not supported from the portal. So a convenience feature, and then that ability to clear out all the old SSIDs, which the overall the system obviously supports, but we just haven't added that functionality to the portal to do it. I also don't think you can do it from the unit either, like to clear all the old
that's the point,
networks. But yeah, we can add it to the portal.
Yeah. If you go to lots of hotels and lots of venues, you've got a long list to go through. So
if you're really stuck on a long list, open a case with support, because we can remote into the unit and do that, like by just going through and deleting them. Obviously, that's not very scalable for, you need to do it often, or you need a lot of users to do it. But if you're real stuck, then obviously just open a support case with us.
Great stuff. Right, I'm going to throw some quick fire questions at you. In fact, you've got them, so you decide which ones you want to answer. Because we've got 5 minutes, so.
Yeah, so let's jump to, all right, we did the Wi-Fi 1 rename modems. So send logs without contacting support was asked about. I mentioned that is definitely coming, not in this portal update tomorrow, but definitely an update this quarter. So then there's a couple around just the video format itself. 422 support, 10-bit color depth support. The encoder that we use in those units today is not 422 capable, so 420 is our whole future on that encoder. But it is 10-bit capable, 10-bit color depth support. I did have a chance at NAB to talk to YouTube about that a little bit. They kind of admitted that don't tell them I repeated this, erase this part of the video, but they kind of admitted that their 10-bit support wasn't deep enough. So when you get into 10-bit support, you get into all these questions of is there metadata along with it that's out of band in the video signal, and how does it really know it's HDR, and what does it do with those 10-bit depths? So they call it 10-bit SDR if it's got no metadata with it. So we had a chance to catch up, long story short, with YouTube on that. And I think they've got some changes coming that are going to be even better 10-bit support. And it is on my mind because that encoder is 10-bit capable. Would be awesome, right? To be able to do HEVC, 10-bit, HDR, still be 420, but send that through to YouTube and be able to do that right from the Pro. I think that's in the future. I just don't know the full timeline to get there on that. And then one last, while we're doing the more technical, kind of video mentor stream stuff, NTP synchronization. So NTP synchronization, for anybody that doesn't know, is the ability for the encoder to inject a timestamp into the video stream to say this frame was made at this absolute time around the world. And then when they get delivered to some final platform, if you have many solos all streaming to it, they could line the frames back up for frame accurate switching based on that NTP sync. That is a feature that is just coming to the broadcast units. So the broadcast units had some support for different types of timestamps coming from the camera or injected at the point of transcode. Now they're getting true inject a timestamp at the point of encode in our next release for the broadcast units. And I have already spoken to the core team about porting that to the Solo Pro. So again, no timeline around it, but the intent that we will eventually support NTP synchronization from the Solo Pro. Did I miss any that you want me to answer, Tom?
Multi-destinations without stream tools. Is that ever going to be an option?
I don't think so. I think, again, stream tools, I don't want to say like, oh, you've got to just get stream tools just for that one feature. But if you see stream tools as a toolbox of all these different things to do with the stream, that's where we hope you see the value. But yeah, right now, no plans for multi-destination outside of stream tools. Multi-destination, fallback slate, logo bug, the 3 launch features, some kind of graphics like scoreboards, next coming feature for stream tools, and then we can all debate what the fifth feature should be after that.
Yeah, I mean we've answered, I think, all the questions that people asked in advance, and I think we've answered all the questions that people have asked live. There's bound to be questions from people that watch this on demand, which I'm sure somebody can answer there. Yeah, I think we've covered all the key things that keep coming up and coming up and coming up, which for us is brilliant. So people can come and watch this video and get all those answers in the future. Robert says, thank you so much for answering so many questions. So,
yeah, you got it. I really appreciate your help on this, Tom. It was great to have you, and
you're welcome.
A representative of the group and a user of Solo. So
have you got anything else to add or say about future things? Anything you want to share?
I think we talked a lot about portal update coming tomorrow, 10.6 for the units coming very soon. That's got the fix for SDI level A, level B, some fix for different modem support, things like that in it. Now I'm forgetting all the other fixes that were in 10.6. We will eventually take the one last point on the portal. We will eventually take the 2 sets of groups, zones. I know it's confusing today, the old and the new. We got really delayed on merging those 2 for technical reasons in the firmwares. When we get a baseline firmware out there for the old and new solos, we'll be able to consolidate those groups. Then SRT will be supported everywhere. You won't have this weird decision between the 2. So that's coming. Sorry on the delay there. It was never our intent to keep them both for so long, and it's definitely been a point of confusion for everybody. I think that probably covers a lot of the stuff coming down the road. And then new features for stream tools. My intent was always to treat that like a toolbox, put more tools in it, hopefully not change the price tag unless the tool really requires a lot more cloud horsepower, and then that changes our economics a little bit. But everything I can put in without changing the price is the goal.
We should definitely do this again, and I need a coffee now.
Got a lot in an hour, that's for sure.
We did indeed. Thank you so much, Dan. Appreciate it. Thanks for staying in touch with us all, and here's to future products.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks again, Tom. Really appreciate the support.
Cheers.